You're listening to the Real Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Cass McCrory, and in this podcast, we highlight women in all kinds of businesses. For yourself, someone else, full-time, part-time, overtime hustle, together we will learn from and with one another. And if we get it right, it'll lift us all. Let's get into it.
Friends, today I'm talking to Stephanie Hayes. We have such a varied conversation. She spills the tea. That's a new Lexi thing that I've learned. That means she gives me all the details on the 4 pillars of purpose. You will want to listen to those. We talk about the difference that you feel from friction to alignment, giving ourselves permission to ask for what we want. This idea of should actually being, and you're going to want to tweet this out, should actually means I wish I didn't have to. Oh, Stephanie brings the goods. I can't wait for you to listen. Let's get into it. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
How are you today?
I am so good now that my technology issues are done for the day.
You know, you can't get away from it.
No, and it always happens at the worst time.
It does. It does. Well, before we get into the nitty gritty that I'm so excited to chat with you about, would you please tell everybody about who you are and what you get to do?
Sure. I am Stephanie Hayes. I am a business strategist and coach, and I work with small businesses and solo entrepreneurs, helping them get past that initial stage where they've kind of figured out that they have a viable business and they're not sure what to do next in order to grow.
I love that. How did you get into this?
Oh, man. I have been working in small businesses and startups since I was the start of my career, so 25 years. And, you know, it was just a matter of being around and exposed to all the things of businesses that are in that sort of hyper-growth phase. Eventually, I started up my own business when my daughter was just about born, so almost 12 years ago. And I think it was just the learning experiences. I have a master's degree basically in entrepreneurship. So I've been in this space for a long time, and it was just something that sort of evolved. People would start asking me to help them. I became an entrepreneur mentor at the university and worked with a lot of startups and getting them through that first initial operations phase. And then, you know, what do they do next? And it just sort of evolved. And what I realized is that I'm not good as the doer. I am so much better and so much happier when I am the strategist and I see everything from a high level and I see the direction. So it just evolved, and it just felt really good when I finally got here.
I love that. When you think about how this is potentially different than you imagined, how is it different? I'm really curious specifically, like when you became really clear on, I work on strategy and not on execution. Because I think there are so many people that find themselves in one camp or the other.
Yeah.
And they don't give themselves permission to fully be in one.
Okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox here.
Please, step on. It's all yours.
So this is the key to having that balance in your life. And it's all about alignment. So I probably took my own experience as the way to build this whole concept for my own clients. And when I finally realized that where the friction is for me in doing my work, it was around being a consultant and being responsible for the deliverables and the outcomes. And I hated having to write reports and write documents and focus on this really detailed work. And I just I would have so much friction around that I would not do it.
Yes.
Everything at the last minute. So if you find that that's you, that you're doing everything at the last minute and you're delaying, it's because there's friction in your work life. And what I take my clients through is this exercise that I named sort of tongue in cheek the 4 pillars of passion, because I was so sick of hearing this, find your passion and you never work a day in your life. And that's a bunch of BS, right?
Yeah.
Because what people will do is they'll go to like, well, I like photography, so maybe I'll start a business around photography. And that's like, it's not, that is not your business passion. Your business passion is going to be one of four different things. It's going to be either the specific customer that you serve. I like to serve, ultra woo-woo shamans and those kinds of people. And that's just who I want to work with. Or it's going to be a particular product or service that you've created. I have a software company and we built a product, and that is what we will sell because we know how good it is. So the third passion is going to be your experience or your particular skill that you want to bring to the table. Or the fourth pillar is the way that you work. And that was mine. And I knew that was my pillar because everything else I would compromise, but I would not. I felt that feeling in my gut when I thought about working in a different way. So I just ran towards what I knew was right and felt easy for me. And now I know that's my pillar. And when I make decisions about the work that I'm going to take on or the work that I'm going to do, I know that even if there's an opportunity that sounds like it could be good where I'm doing a bunch of consulting work, I know in the end I will hate it. So I know that I don't take it on. Now we want to optimize for all the pillars, but when you have to find that one, and that becomes the basis on which you make all your decisions. And suddenly, when you've reached alignment, you've got a business that you really like, it doesn't feel like you're working anymore. It just flows. Mm-hmm. And this happens with all my customers. It's the most important thing that we do. So when you talk about work-life balance, if you can have joy in the work that you do and you can love every day that you're working, that to me does not feel like friction anymore. And I just flow in and out of my business and my personal life and my work, my kids and my work. And it just all becomes this big sort of homogeneous entity that just feels great. And I have fun. And sure, there's things I have to do, and sometimes there are deadlines. But when you get really intentional and really clear about what you want, really, really what you want, that's where you have to start. And then everything else flows from there.
You are speaking my love language of alignment and flow right now. And I love these 4 pillars of purpose and how do you have that online somewhere we can link people to?
Do I have that on? Yes, I think I do somewhere.
Well, we'll find it and we'll link it in the show notes, because that is brilliant. Because I think so frequently people think they think they need to have passion and purpose in all 4 pillars. And you probably want to have some ideas in different places here, but I love that you found your primary and then you went all in on it.
You have to. You really do, because otherwise you end up in a day-to-day grind that you kind of just hate, right?
Yeah.
And if you can sort of compromise, we run a test against all of the pillars once you've identified what's ideal for each one. And we figure out which one is the primary. And once you know that's your primary, then everything else flows around that. And so then we move into designing your offers and figuring out who you're serving and all of that based on what you have figured out for your pillars and your values and your goals and that sort of thing. So we actually start building a business from the person as opposed to what you learn in business school, which is always start with the customer. And that doesn't work. That works if your particular customer is your pillar, like it is for a few different people. But otherwise, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you start designing your business around your customer, because you can go down a rabbit hole and end up designing a business that you don't really like. Maybe it works for the customer, but you don't really like it.
I think that is such good knowledge, and it's such a feminine way of thinking about it, which I am all in on. And I'm just going to say, I love Seth Godin, and it's not that I don't love Seth, because I do. And I think he puts out so much greatness, but he is always talking about the customer first.
Yeah.
And it's There's something to it, but that is, in my view, a very masculine way of approaching it, where you're not really thinking about the end in mind. Because if we're thinking about the end in mind, we're thinking about, what do I want my life to look like?
Totally.
I'm not going to create a business I don't want to run.
Right. And this came from working with a client in my sort of early coaching days, where you get this sort of framework that you've been taught in business school and all the lean startup stuff and everything. And it's like this very lovely framework for starting with your customer and moving out through there. And I was sitting here talking to this lady, and she's like, well, I tried photography and I tried, this and that. And I don't know what I need my business to be. And then we were talking about some clients she had worked with, and her whole, she was like morose. And then we started talking about these clients she had worked with, and her whole energy changed. She was just like lit up. And I'm like, oh, right. And so for her, it was this particular client. It was the ultra woo shaman. She's like, if I could just serve those people forever, I don't really care what I would do for them. Now, obviously she wants to do something that she can do, but she was focusing on the wrong details. She was focusing on the what she's doing, when really she needed to focus on the who and then build out from there. And so she could use the traditional model,
right,
from a customer, because that was the most important thing to her. But 98% of the business owners I work with, it's actually one of the other pillars. And then you can reverse engineer the model. So if your pillar is the service, and that's what you want to deliver, then you work backwards from there, and you figure out who wants what you want, right? And then you're just in alignment and you're in flow. But this, I can read you a quote from one of my customers that went through this. And she came to me and she started working with me in tears, because she was just like, this is so hard. This is so hard. Every month is a struggle. I just don't know what to do next. We went through this exercise, and this was literally 3 months ago. And we went through this exercise, and she says, so her whole business has changed. She's made more money this month than she has ever made in her life. And it's easier. It's much easier. Her whole business blew up within a few weeks of us doing this exercise. And she wrote me an email, and she says, I've never had anyone talk to me about alignment in my business before until I met you. Having a business that I'm aligned with is the solution to pretty much all my problems. It's the answer to stress, anxiety, overwhelm. And then she talks about how some of her services have changed because she started doing them the way that she thought. Because this is a symptom, right? A lot of people go and follow these sort of cookie cutter business models that worked for someone else, but just she realized that she was doing that, and everything was kind of in friction. And she says, alignment is everything. If something feels like resistance, it's probably because it's not what's best for my business. And now I trust that feeling. And I'm also learning, and you're going to like this, that I'm not separate from my business. My business is an extension of me, and being in line makes it so enjoyable. And so she's had this so now she's got this flow. She's got this foundation for her business, and she's grown this customer base by 50%. And her followers have doubled. And she got picked up by a magazine within a few days of shifting her positioning to what felt right for her, that this was the exercise that we did. And she got picked up, and then all of a sudden everybody's paying attention to her. She's got this momentum that's just not going to go away, and it's easy for her. But coming back to what you said about the feminine, I know that we talked about this when we were in Boston together. But what kind of occurred to me is that what we're doing wrong is that we're trying to continue to do business in a very masculine way. And we all have feminine and masculine energy. And so I'm not talking about women and men.
Right.
I'm talking about the fact that business has typically been masculine energy, quick, fast. How quickly can we do things? Profit, money, win, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say in my career, what I finally realized when we were sitting there in Boston together was that what I had done when I worked as a consultant for so many years was I tried to fit myself into that very masculine stereotype. And but then I would always just do what kind of came to me naturally. And I worked in a very male dominated industry. I was in IT, I was in technology. And all of the men around me would always say to me, you can't do that. You can't be like that in business. You can't. But then I would get all the sales and I would be the one who and I would win. And what I realized is but it felt so weird, and it felt like I was always doing something that was wrong, yet it was always getting results. And it was this weird juxtaposition. And when I went out on my own and started coaching, I am entirely surrounded by women. Like 99% of my interaction is with women. So I've gone from like 25 years of male domination to, the last 3 or 4 years has been just women. And what I've realized is I now have the ability to just use the skills that I know how to use, building relationships, to slow business movement, right? This is the platform that I'm championing. This stuff doesn't work. Push, 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 profit, profit, profit. This does not help you build a sustainable, growth-oriented business. You need to be able to sit and let things percolate. I run a 6-month program and we go through 6 modules. So there's a month per module. Every single person in this program comes back and says, I love the pace, right? It doesn't make sense to push. If I tried to build everyone's businesses around profit and around money, I will never promise that to people because I can't. And if all we did was focus on money, they would all quit.
Yes.
Good. Because the things that are causing them to not make money or to not progress have nothing to do with money or sales or marketing. Eventually you got to get that right too. But
right.
When we come back to that core, this is all about feeling good every day and waking up and being excited, partially because you're doing work that you really love to do, but you're also working in the way that you like to work. So there's none of this friction where you wake up and you're like, oh God, I have to sit and do all these reports, or I have to sit down and work for, write for 6 hours just to crank out client work, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go on. But this whole feminine side of businesses is such an interesting thing. If men started adopting feminine energy and doing business too, they could be more successful, especially with the way that our business world is emerging now, right? So I see a real dichotomy in the way that women and men do business right now.
Yeah. There was so much in there that I want to dig into. First thing, you mentioned friction a couple of times, and I know what friction feels like in my life, and I can identify. For me, I know friction is happening when I spend more time cleaning the countertops than I do doing the work. Like cleaning and getting things organized is the way in which I manifest friction physically, because otherwise I'm too invested, involved in everything else going on to do those things. I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. But if you see me straightening up our cupboards, there's friction going on, and I'm in a very deep pile of avoidance.
Yes.
What other things have you experienced with your clients? How do they bring friction out? How would they notice friction?
Everyone's a little bit different, but I will say that I work with a lot of creative entrepreneurs, and they're introverts, and they all have sort of similar patterns. So the avoidance is a huge one. And I have one client who just knows, that's her trigger, is when she's starting to do everything but work, right? And whatever that is, whether it's the cleaning or, I'm the same way. If something's in friction, I will find 800 things to do around the house that are completely meaningless. And then I realize, but I also feel it in my gut, right? I feel almost like this anxiety. I've become really, really tuned to it. And I'm like, oh, that's wrong. Don't do it, right? A lot of people, it's the avoidance, it's the procrastination. I just wrote an article on perfectionism and because that's what everybody suffers from. It's the perfectionism, it's the procrastination. And that comes from a lot of fear, right? When we're doing things we don't really feel aligned with, we're really fearful that we're not going to get them right, or that we don't want to go farther down that path, but we don't listen to our bodies. All we listen to is the logic and the stuff that's out there saying, this is what you're supposed to do. And yet we have this conflict, because in our hearts and our guts, and using all of our feminine feeling features, Three F's.
Yeah.
We know it's not right. So there's lots of different ways that manifests. I see a lot of in that sort of procrastination until if you're always working on a deadline and you always feel like you're at the last doing things at the last minute, that's a really good trigger that you're kind of doing things in a way that's not what you really want to do. Or the feast or famine is a really good example of when we're not in alignment. We're focusing on doing things in these like rushes, right? And we never get the balance. We never feel like we can have, the consistent attention to all the different parts of our business. When I work with my clients, we create a work schedule that a lot of people initially, when they hear that, they're like, oh, I don't like schedules. But actually, it's the freedom. It creates the freedom in their lives to be able to continue to focus on all of the different things that they need to focus on for their business. So anyway, back to your original question, there are a lot of different ways that this manifests, but the procrastination, the avoidance, that like anxiety that people feel, and they start to resent their business. They start to resent the clients, right?
Yeah.
Which is misplaced.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a place for these 4 pillars, even if you work within like a larger organization? Or do you feel like, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about how you see that in play, because I think, for this podcast, for Real Women in Business, I don't want it just to be for solo entrepreneurs, because I think that there is a huge movement of support for the solo entrepreneur, which I'm grateful for. But I also think that there's a lot of people that do operate best and like their life most when they work in a bigger company.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you see it playing out in those environments.
Interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I had on my agenda for this year was to start looking at how I can create something for what I call intrapreneurs as well, which are, that's not my term that's been used for time, but I have always maintained that whether or not you're being paid by a company or yourself, you need to treat yourself like a business. And that means that you are constantly looking at the cost and benefits of where you're at in your job or your employment. And if something is out of alignment, right, this is going to help you find the places that you are going to perform best. And I wish I had known that back when I haven't had a job in I'm basically unemployable now, but I haven't had a job in a really long time. But if I think back to that, and this, I spent 2.5 years working in an organization that was like pseudo government, and it was so misaligned with what I now know about myself. If I had known about the 4 pillars, if I had understood myself better, I wouldn't have spent those, 2.5, 3 years in this organization where I was basically crying every day from frustration. And I would be able to seek out the work that I knew. I think a lot of people don't really understand what kind of work they like to do and don't like to do, and what's really important for them. I think this could be just as useful to someone inside an organization as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I hear consistently is this feeling of, well, I'm not in control of the situation. And I always am turning that back around. Because like, even if you do work for somebody else, you are in control of your situation, in complete control. And to know a couple of things, you need to create a container for this to exist so that it doesn't rub off on everything else. And you even mentioned that just a couple of minutes ago about this idea of when you start to work with somebody, you ask them to create these hours. You create this container for the work to exist. What's your container like?
Oh, so my container is made up of boundaries, and my boundaries are made up of the things that I want for my life. And that was, getting really clear on what I value. And I think I had spent so long in my life just making that secondary and not really being clear on it, right? And I think what a lot of people do is they don't give themselves permission to ask for what they want. And so when I started thinking about the places that I feel that friction in my life, it was things like I would come home from working in the city and I would never be able to pick my kids up from school. I had no idea who they were talking about when they would talk about their friends or I didn't know their teachers. So one of the boundaries of my containers is that I always get to pick my kids up from school. Right. And so that became one of the places that I created a boundary of my container. So they're a bit older now. They're basically teenagers and they don't want me around. So, but it still feels good to be able to be part of their little community when I can go and pick them up from school. I only have a few more years of that left, but I started that, back when they were 4 or 5, 6 kind of thing. So that was something that was really important to me. I know myself too, that I don't want anybody to own my time. And that is like a huge trigger for me to the point where it's ridiculous. And so I need to put a container around my work so that I'm able to control my time and I'm able to decide and have the choice around what I do. Somebody else's containers are going to be quite different. Someone else's containers might be that they only have to do 3 hours, no more than 3 hours per day of creative work, for example. And so we create a container on that. So the whole work scheduling piece is not just about allocating hours, but building in your values and your preferences and the way that you have to work. The more you fight it, the more you say, I should be doing something. The minute you say I should, that's when you need to check that, right? Should is just another way of saying, I wish I didn't have to.
That is so good. Say that again. Should is really just another way of saying,
I wish I didn't have to.
I wish I didn't have to.
Now that I just said that, I think I'm going to write a blog post on it.
Right? I think that is so good.
Yeah.
Tell me more about, because I remember definitively I had a day, because we have very parallel paths here, Stephanie. I didn't realize this as much, but there was a point when Lexi was very little and I was like, you know what? I want to be there from 3:30 until bedtime. I want to be the one that does that after school time. I want to be the one that hears the complaints about people on the bus. I want to be in the mix in that time. And then there have been a handful of situations in my own personal work where I've compromised that. And very, very quickly, I feel the friction. And I'm like, nope, that was there for a reason. And I have to dial it back so that still gets to be true. Did you learn it? Did you know it instinctively, or did you have a moment?
So my story is not quite as nice. I was the primary breadwinner, and I started up my first business. I was the only breadwinner, let's put it that way. And I started up my first business a month before I gave birth to my first child. Super great timing. And not only was it a time thing, but it was a money thing. I had put in, tens of thousands of dollars to invest in starting up this business. So there was nowhere to go except forward. So I had my first kid and basically was continuing to work as soon as she was born, and you go through the recovery, but that business was running. It was up and running when I gave birth to my child. And of course, I had no idea what this was going to be like. And my ex-husband was supposed to be the one that's staying home and yada, yada. And he did, but I think I enabled too much of the I'm going to do everything and blah, 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 blah. But what I realized very quickly was that wasn't going to work. I had to leave the house in order to make the division of labor work, right? So I ended up spending a lot of time away from my kids when they were babies and when they were really, really little. And by the time my son was born, the business was in full swing. It was 2 years old, and I was in the middle of a project up in Edmonton, and I had to travel every week to that project. So basically here I had a C-section with my second and not in good shape. I've got my daughter who's 2. I've got, this business that's growing, and I need to be away. And it was hell. It was absolute hell. But I think the worst part of it was that when I started to realize that my kids had such an attachment to their dad and zero attachment to me. So I would come home and I'd have zero role in their lives. I would come home at night after working. I'd fly out in the morning on a 7 a.m. flight, which is, 4 a.m. wake up time for me, work all day, 10 hours away, and then come back. And I'd come home and they wanted nothing to do with me. They would have their dinner and they'd be like, yeah, hi. But I couldn't do bedtime. I couldn't do baths. I couldn't do any of it. It had to be him. And I'm so grateful that they have the relationship that they do with their dad, because it's awesome. He loves them. They love him. He's a great dad. But I had zero involvement in their life and they didn't want me to. Not because they're bad or they're mean or anything.
No, just because that wasn't their experience.
And
yeah.
It was heartbreaking. And I would find myself sometimes just going, well, fine, they should just live with him full time and they don't want me. And so I had to push through that. And it took, when I finally was like, this is BS, right? I had to change my life and moved into this role and owning my own business. Well, I did already, but that business eventually I gave back because it wasn't working. It's still up and running, but whatever. But I just realized I needed more control over my time and my life, because this isn't something that you can redo, right?
Right.
So by the time they were at school, I think that was the big clincher, was that I realized that I have no idea who their community is, who their friends are, who their teachers are. So I had to very intentionally build this business so that I could have whatever time I wanted. And it's taken, I think that started when I think my daughter was 6 or 7 and she's now 11. And it's taken this long to the point where I feel like I actually have an attachment with them. And I remember the early days when they were really little, I would go away and I had to stop calling home. I wouldn't even talk to them when I was away because it was such a conflict and I felt so guilty and it was confusing for them. And it was almost easier for them to just forget about me. And then I'd come home and they'd be like, oh, cool, whoever you are.
Yeah.
So that was a huge sacrifice and I don't recommend it to anybody. You don't get that back. And it's taken years of hard work to finally be convinced that my kids want to spend time with me. And now my daughter is actually coming around the other way, where she wants to hang out. She's emulating a lot of what I do. And we have this lovely relationship now. But, there's still some holdover from that. And it wasn't fun. It was not fun at all.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that so frequently we don't really look at the cost of what we've, and not from a regret standpoint, even just from a subjectively, I'm here looking at what I've done, what I created, I picked it. There was a cost and it was too great. And so I need to shift this.
Yeah.
That's tremendous work to do that. And I applaud you for it, and not because of the outcome that you came to, but that you came to an outcome that you love.
Yeah, well, I consider myself to be very fortunate to have had the wherewithal to make that happen. And I'm probably more hard-headed and strong-willed than I actually should be. But I live in a world of optimism where I feel like anything is possible. And there's just you just got to figure it out. So were there risks? Absolutely. Did I put myself in a really risky position? I sure did. I'm feeling much more comfortable about that now, but there were a few years of financial hardship, especially along with the divorce and everything like that, where I lost everything and I had to give up everything. And, I was 40 years old with nothing. All my assets were gone, everything, and building again, right? So things weren't easy. And it wasn't like I just sort of pranced through this, but I knew in my heart of hearts that that was the most important thing and that I had to do something to fix it. And so I did. But it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen without sacrifice. It didn't happen without consequences. But the one thing that I knew needed to be fixed was fixed. And so I can feel good about everything else. And all of the rest of it is consequential and is just, circumstantial. And all those things can be dealt with. But the relationship you have with your children can't be done over.
No, there's no do-overs in this gig of motherhood.
Really isn't.
No. Wouldn't that be nice? There's a couple of days I'd redo. There's a couple days.
Oh. But I found being really honest with my kids, like they have conversations with me that I'm not sure everybody would, but I'm really honest and open. I want them to know that I'm a human being and that I screw things up, and that, I'm mad right now, but it doesn't mean that it's changed the way I feel towards them and stuff. And so for better or for worse, it's been hard and sometimes we screw it up. But, Hayden said to me the other day when we were driving, I said, I'm responsible for my behavior. And he said, but Mommy, we like you just as you are, even if you get mad sometimes. Even I'm like, oh my God, I've done something right.
Right.
We don't want to get into parenting here, but there's a lot of things that you can do to recover. And, it's not the end of the world if something didn't go exactly as you wanted it to, as long as you can learn from it, shift, and start moving towards what you really want. And I see a lot of people get paralyzed thinking they can't have what they really want, but they can. They can. There's always a way and there's always a plan. And it's better for everybody if you do.
Yeah. Talk more about that. Where did you develop that muscle of optimism?
I don't know. I think I was born with it. It's a good question. I've always been quite determined. And I think part of that has just been exposure at a young age to a lot of different stuff, right? And I mean that in a good way, just getting myself involved in programs or I talk to a lot of people. I'm always curious. And so what I realize is that there's lots of opportunity out there, and there are lots of different ways that you can go, and we're not stuck. We're not stuck in one place. But what I have to my advantage is that I'm willing, right? I'm willing to take some risks, and I'm willing to be curious. And I think if we get curious, we have a lot more opportunity to figure things out. But that mindset shift is from I'm painted into a corner. This is my lot in life. There are no other options. The mindset shift of just that little shift to being curious, saying what other options are there? Knowing if I look at somebody and I see that they've done something, I don't see any reason why I can't do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And better, right? So in a way, it's a little bit of just a personality thing, but I also think it's been the exposure to people and to experiences and to just being really curious and reading a lot and listening a lot and talking a lot and understanding that these people who have achieved what we really want, they're just human beings. They're human beings that have persevered and tried and been curious.
Yeah. When I think back and I think about what's the difference, what has made the biggest difference in my life, it was that I was willing to try.
Yeah.
Knowing that I wouldn't be good, being okay with whatever outcome came, but saying, I'm going to try that anyway.
Yeah. And breaking down that perfectionism, and I used to suffer from that as well, but breaking down the perfectionism and realizing that there's nobody standing there waiting to judge you.
No.
They're all busy. You're lucky.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. So I kind of run headlong into things now because I cannot wait to fail. Because as soon as I fail, I'm closer to being successful. I have new information. I'd rather know what doesn't work because then I can get closer to what does work. But if I just sit here waiting for the perfect time and being afraid, I will never get closer to what I want. And so it's okay. It's okay to go forward and have a total disaster. I tried to launch a program last year I knew I hadn't done a lot of work to prepare. It was a little bit of an experiment. And we were like, oh, we've got like, 9 or 10 people who are interested. This should be easy. And we launched to crickets. There was nobody, no one, not a single taker, which is fine, right? And I'm like, okay, we're going to shut this thing down like now. And I turned around and launched a new program a month and a half later and filled it, just because I had that experience and I knew what I needed to do.
I think that is that lens of I'm experimenting. Nothing is to be taken too seriously here.
Yeah.
That piece of it, I love that. I think so many people are paralyzed by, is this going to be good enough? What is somebody going to think? They have this idea that people are going to think about them at all, which I think is crazy because people don't.
No.
Yeah, I'm so with you. I feel like, if we were in person, I'd link arms with you and we just triumph through the world, because it's like, I feel completely similarly.
It's just bravery, right? And people are actually more scared of success than they are of failure, because we're conditioned. We're conditioned to grow up and we can have a little bit of tolerance for like, not everybody wins at everything and that sort of thing. But what people get really scared of, there's like 6 or 7 things that they get scared of with success, that they're going to have to become a different person, that they're going to have to compromise their integrity or their values, that they're not going to be able to sustain the success, that they're going to, so I wrote an article on this too, but there are all these things that hold them back because they're afraid of what's going to happen when they actually succeed as well. So there's so much pressure on us to be able to get things right the first time. And I can tell you, in reality, it's a bunch of BS. We are much better off to just jump in, see what happens, make the necessary mess, and then move out of there, right? Do it fast, do it quickly, keep your eyes open, watch what happens.
Yeah.
And you're just going to continue to increment. So what I rail against in a lot of my writing is about this crap that's out there with the 6 figures in 6 weeks and instant success and profit. Like, shut up. Because all you're doing is you're creating this anxiety with business owners. And what I know actually happens is I'll work with them for 9 months. And by the end of 9 months, they're just starting to get there, right? But they're happy as hell because they have put the foundation in place. They have figured it out. And maybe they're not even making any money more than they were before, but they're happy because this business feels good for them now, right? So whether that's a business, whether that's your job, I think the same principles exist, that you can get that kind of alignment and find something that really works for you.
I completely agree. I mean, I was like an original fan of Danielle Lepore. Back when the Firestarter sessions were a binder, like it was.
Hometown.
I mean, I just have a lot of love for that woman. And she did the core desired feelings, and I did all of that. And I've been in this mindset of it is really more about what you feel than anything else. And it's like, if you're feeling happy, if it's feeling good, keep doing it.
Right.
It will result in whatever outcome you most desire.
Sure. And it's actually true in everything in business. Everything is about how you make people feel, whether you're interacting with people in an office, whether you are selling something. I mean, that's the whole key to selling is making people feel something, right? It has nothing to do with, with advertising or how much advertising you've bought or how much content you've created. You have to make people feel something. And then they will decide whether they're going to work with you or not. But everything in our lives is how we feel. Whether you're running a huge organization or whether you're a solo entrepreneur or whether you're just working in inside of a company, it's all about your success is all about how you make yourself feel and how you make other people feel.
This has been such a great conversation. I don't want it to end. I have a couple of questions that I need to make sure that I ask you, because if I don't, I'll be like kicking myself later. If you were to give advice to a young woman just starting out on her journey, what would you share?
Oh, I think it comes right back to what we were just talking about. Just start trying, right? Go out there and make the necessary mess. Get your hands dirty. get in there and just start doing the stuff, take action, and then clarity is going to come from that.
The necessary mess.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is so just
written about that.
That is amazing. I love that, the visual of that, because there's a necessary mess into doing the work of becoming who you are.
And once you accept that, then you just jump into it. Like, you don't stand there waiting for it to be clean.
Yes. Oh, that's juicy. What tactical thing do you do each week that brings you joy and more ease?
My planning. So a lot of people think that they need to do planning in these big chunks. And one of the things, especially when I'm getting really busy or there's like a busy time, like I'm going into a launch right now and launching my group program right this week. When there's lots of stuff going on, I have a whole system for planning that makes sure that everything that I'm working on is aligned to my immediate goals. And so I do my planning on a daily basis, and I do it the night before the next day. So I wake up every morning and I'm just like, go. I don't have to think about what I'm doing. I don't have to make any judgment calls about what I'm doing. I do my planning at nighttime when things are calm and when I'm not right in the thick of it. And then I don't have any pressure, and I can really sort of evaluate what is the best use of my time. So that is my tactic that keeps everything sane, calm, grounded. But we're not saving lives, right? I mean, some people are, but most of us are not.
I'm also not.
No, I'm not either. I mean, sort of, in a way.
I'm helping. I'd like to think that I'm helping people have greater versions of their lives, but I'm not saving anybody's life, and I'm quite glad about that.
Right. And so if something doesn't quite work out, then just shift the next day. So if you didn't make everything happen that you had on we only choose max 3 things per day to try and accomplish. And I teach my clients to break all of their to-dos down into bite-sized pieces. There should never be anything on your to-do list that will take you more than an hour. So you got to break it down. That way we feel momentum, we keep things going, we cross things off our list, and psychologically we need that, right? And if we're always just trying to work towards some big gargantuan goal, but we never break it down, we're going to feel constantly stuck, or we're going to feel like frustrated because we don't realize that we're doing these little micro things all the time to move ourselves forward. We don't see it. So the whole planning tactic program that I've created is actually really, really good at keeping everything sane, moving forward, and progressive. And so we always feel like we're making incremental steps towards our goals.
I love that. The thing that I'm always saying to clients and kids and anybody is, what's the best next step? That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know.
If you know the best next step, that's it. The next one will show up after that. And if you're fretting about step number 44, you'll never get there.
No, and if you didn't get to step 44 in the time that you wanted to,
doesn't matter.
Oh well. Then readjust, right?
Doesn't matter.
We're in this constant cycle. There are no ends.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. All right. We're going to do a lightning round of questions. Your go-to jam when you need to up your energy.
Oh my God. So I have to say that right now is Downtown by Macklemore, because my kids have been playing it nonstop. It's the most hilarious video. It's such a smart song, and I can't get it out of my head. So it's like funky,
love it,
hilarious, and upbeat.
What time do you wake up?
I wake up 6 every morning, and I lie in bed for half an hour because that's my choice.
Oh, that's powerful. Yeah.
I have 2 alarms that go off, one at 6 and one at 7.
Nice. What does breakfast look like?
Usually a protein shake with some greens in it.
Nice.
And
your favorite ritual?
Gosh, I'm just not a huge ritual person because I love variety and I love to have things in my life that are constantly dynamic. But I would say if I have anything that's a little bit of a ritual, it's something I started in the last year when I had a spa client. And I had no idea
Ooh.
that there was such a thing as gel nails. So I get them done every 2 weeks. And for me, it's a little bit of a ritual. It's like I go in, it's my time I can't do anything. I can't do any work. And I just connect with people when I'm there.
I'm so with you on that. I feel like gel nails, getting your nails done is such an act of both patience and complete self-indulgence for me personally, because you can do nothing else while this is happening.
Right. And it's a weird thing. It's not something, I mean, I've never grown up being a girly girl, and I didn't even know what they were until last year. I started working with this client, but there's something about the ritual of going in and getting them done. And then, for 2 weeks, I'm looking at my pretty nails and they actually make me happy. I like this color that I have on. Right
yeah. What color is that? Do you keep track of your?
It's called Sassy.
Yes. That was my nickname as a kid. In fact, this is a little known fact. My dad is an onion farmer, and he has a brand of onions called Sassy Onions, which were like New York State's Vidalia. Oh yeah. And it has my 18-month-old face all over the bag.
That's incredible. That is like the best story I've heard in a long time.
Sassy Cassie.
Sassy Onions.
Couldn't get away from Sassy Cassie. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, 100%.
Yeah. Morning person or night owl?
Oh boy, that's changed a lot as I've gotten older. I used to be a total night owl. Now I don't love getting up in the morning, but I actually appreciate the sort of the solitude and the quiet. So yeah, I'd prefer to get up in the morning now.
Nice. What is the book you give the most?
What is the book?
Yes.
I give the most?
Yes.
I would have to say it is Drive by Daniel Pink.
Nice. Okay. What can someone do to help you feel appreciated?
My love language is acts of service. So if someone returns the favor, does something that they know that I need, someone came and exchanged my propane tank without me knowing, without even asking, just because they knew that I needed it or that I was going to have a hard time getting it out myself. Like, acts of service for me are so huge, and they're like way ahead of anything else in the whole love languages.
Nice. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today. It's so appreciated. Tell people where they can find you online.
You can find me at stephaniehayes.biz, B-I-Z. It is the center of everything. I'm also very active on Instagram at stephaniehayes.biz. And all my content is there. And I am currently running a webinar on June 12th for business owners who are trying to create those sort of colors of alignment.
Awesome. Well, this episode will air on June 10th. So the timing here is right.
Awesome.
Yes. Awesome. Stephanie, thank you again. So appreciated.
You're so welcome. Thank you very much for having me on.